Yes, miss. What was the name of the horse? I've gone blank. Bird brain. No, that came in third. Fishwife.
For decades, Fawlty Towers has been a goldmine of laughs, chaos, and unforgettable characters. But what if I told you there's a secret lurking beneath the surface that most fans have completely missed?
He would sit at his desk and staring into space. And the moment he saw someone coming, he would pretend to be busy. He'd pick up a pencil and start, because I watched him once.
A detail so subtle, yet so pivotal, that it changes how we see one of the most iconic sitcoms ever made. John Cleese, the man behind Basil Fawlty, is finally pulling back the curtain. Get ready for a revelation that not only redefines the show, but also opens your eyes to the true genius behind its madness. Trust me, once you know this, you'll never look at Fawlty Towers the same way again. Real hotel owner. John Cleese's portrayal of Basil Fawlty in Fawlty Towers is widely considered one of the most memorable characters in British comedy. And much of his eccentric, abrasive behavior was directly inspired by a real hotel owner, Donald Sinclair. In the early 1970s, Cleese and the Monty Python team stayed at Sinclair's Fawlty Towers-esque hotel in Torquay, where the eccentricity of Sinclair's behavior left a lasting impression. Sinclair, known for his authoritarian demeanor and ill-tempered disposition, provided Cleese with the perfect foundation for creating a character who combined unrestrained frustration with a stubborn, misguided sense of superiority. Sinclair's actions were not just irritating, but bizarre, offering Cleese the kind of vivid, larger-than-life character traits that could be transferred to the fictional Basil. One memorable incident that highlights Sinclair's peculiar behavior occurred when Eric Idle, another member of the Monty Python team, had his briefcase taken by the hotel manager, who insisted on hiding it. When Idle asked about it, Sinclair responded that the briefcase had been misplaced and refused to give a reasonable explanation. This episode, though seemingly trivial, encapsulated Sinclair's disregard for logic and his need to assert power in small, frustrating ways. Cleese, ever the keen observer of human behavior, recognized this as the perfect fuel for Basil Fawlty's frequent bursts of misplaced authority. In fact, this incident became a defining moment for Cleese, influencing his creation of a character whose actions were often driven by his own insecurities and need to control those around him. Also, extending beyond the briefcase incident, Sinclair had a penchant for stressfully rude behavior towards those within the hotel environment, be it shouting over some petty violation or passing contemptuous remarks. Owing to his meddlesome attitude, the ambiance felt heavy with tension, and requests were met with confrontational, the Basil way in Fawlty Towers. Cleese thought of these eccentricities as defining Sinclair as an irritable hotelier and as a dangerous variable whose hijinks could create tension but also humor. That unpredictable volatility that Sinclair's actual behavior emulated any Basil traits formed the nexus. Whether Basil undermined Sybil or lost it with the guests, his behavior emanated from an irrational conviction that only he was right. The way Cleese could transform Sinclair's ill-tempered demeanor into such an unmistakable comical caricature was really inspirational. Basil Fawlty was built, just like Sinclair, on delusions of grandeur and a need to remain seemingly unflappable in this world. That was the end of Fawlty's resemblance to Sinclair. A little vulnerability on Cleese's part served to humanize the character. It was almost as if he were projecting his own rudeness as a defense mechanism against deep-seated insecurities, as Sinclair would have done. A melting pot of Sinclair's real-life idiosyncrasies and Cleese's razor-sharp comic timing renders the ordinary hotelier an icon of comedy. The same meticulous attention to detail that defined Basil's character also influenced another bold decision Cleese made, one that would forever change the legacy of the show. Intentional end at 12 episodes. The decision to end Fawlty Towers after just 12 episodes was a deliberate and strategic choice made by John Cleese and co-writer Connie Booth. Unlike many shows that are often extended beyond their original vision for financial gain or network pressure, Cleese and Booth chose to conclude the series on their own terms. They were deeply committed to maintaining the show's creative integrity, and they felt that dragging the series on for too long would diminish the quality that made it so unique in the first place. This decision was not only driven by their desire to preserve the sharpness of the show's satire and humor, but also by an awareness of the risks that come with overexposure in television. Cleese and Booth were acutely aware that, as with any successful series, there is always the temptation to extend the narrative further. However, both creators shared the belief that doing so could dilute the show's original impact. They feared that stretching the series beyond its natural conclusion would lead to tired plots, repetitiveness, and a loss of the emotional and comedic punch that made Fawlty Towers so special. By deciding to end the show after 2 series, they ensured that each episode retained its freshness and unpredictability, avoiding the pitfalls of stagnation that often plague long-running sitcoms. As he noted, his ending of Fawlty Towers, while it was still at the peak, coincides with that very philosophy concerning just about everything in his career. Full extension of the successful formula achieved would have been great. He proved this by always ending in order to make being meaningful to the world rather than for cash. With Cleese's grace and leaving lingering audiences behind, it was like trying to make it permanent for them rather than overlaying another show added to overslaying. It was all in for his ideal of starting and ending on a high note while still good, and he kept this throughout his career. Instead, the 12 become a landmark not just to Fawlty Towers, but also for Cleese's view of things in initiation and creativity. The Fawlty Towers series, though short-lived, has been nurtured and uplifted in such a manner as to fit deeply into the annals of television history. Since the show was limited to 12 episodes after all, that proverbial factor endowed it with permanence. It was thus doomed to remain as a self-contained perfect piece, and never as a series that remained longer than it should. The Germans' streaming removal. In 2020, the iconic Fawlty Towers episode The Germans was temporarily removed from UK TV's streaming platform due to its use of offensive language, sparking a significant controversy. The removal was part of an increasing trend of re-evaluating older content in the light of modern sensibilities around race and language. The episode, which includes outdated racial slurs, was deemed problematic by some viewers and platforms in an era increasingly sensitive to issues of race and inclusivity. UK TV's decision to pull the episode from its lineup highlighted the growing tension between preserving classic content and addressing contemporary standards of cultural sensitivity. John Cleese was quick to respond to the removal, voicing his frustration and defending the intent of the episode. He criticized the move as cowardly and gutless, emphasizing that the humor in Fawlty Towers was satirical and aimed at mocking prejudice, not endorsing it. Cleese made it clear that the use of controversial language in the episode was a tool to highlight the absurdity of bigoted attitudes rather than an attempt to perpetuate those views. His response to the censorship was sharp, reminding audiences that satire often involves confronting uncomfortable truths, and this was an integral part of the show's legacy. Cleese's defense raised important questions about the line between artistic freedom and the responsibility of content creators in today's sensitive cultural climate. This episode exemplified the creeping accommodation of social media in drawing the line between comedy and censorship within public discourse. Cleese's response was countered in an endless stream of arguments and rebuttals. across a myriad of social media platforms, all of which provide a microphone for members of society to express strong support or condemnation. An exegesis of some argued that the language in the show ought to change because social values change. Those on the other side, Cleese and others, contended that satire by its very definition seeks to cross such boundaries and criticizes social standards rather than pander to them. Thus, this episode shows one such example where social media instantly became a battlefield for rival rights of free speech versus comedy against cultural standards in real time, further aggravating the debate and inflaming feelings of outrage. In the end, UK TV brought back the offending episode, The Germans, with a content advisory to allow viewers to make an informed choice about watching the show while generating further dialogue about the cancel culture and contemporary sensitivity surrounding old television programs. Some would say this was a genuine compromise. Others would consider it a politically correct surrender. The show hardly shut the door on the ongoing debate surrounding how history interacts with present-day censorship, but did shed a little clarity on the frail condition of older artifacts in the face of ever-changing social situations with changing notions of what is deemed acceptable. It does force some pretty fundamental questions about how we are supposed to relate to older constructions in a world that is so much more focused on the social. N-word removed from the play. In May 2024, John Cleese made headlines when he confirmed the removal of the N-word from the script of the West End stage adaptation of Fawlty Towers. The decision pertained to a line originally spoken by the character Major Gowan, an elderly guest known for outdated and offensive views. While the line had long been part of the original television version, Cleese chose to omit it from the live production to prevent potential misinterpretation. The change was announced ahead of the play's debut and was met with mixed reactions, ranging from praise for modern sensitivity to criticism for altering a historically satirical work. Cleese explained that the removal was not about backing down from controversy, but rather about adapting the material for a different cultural context. He argued that modern audiences are often more literal-minded and may fail to recognize the satirical intention behind such language. According to Cleese, the original script used the offensive term not to endorse racism, but to highlight the absurdity and ignorance of certain attitudes. However, he acknowledged that the satirical nuance might be lost on contemporary theatergoers, who could mistake the character's offensive language as representative of the show's own values. To avoid that risk, he made what he called a pragmatic adjustment to preserve the spirit of the play without relying on potentially inflammatory wording. He has declared about the difference, which concerns ridicule and accentuating the British situation comedy in the famous Fawlty Towers. The joke, in Cleese's words, made vividly apparent the stunning stupidity of acts of prejudice while not normalizing them. Cleese is promoting the idea that the satire is still valid by stripping away the argument against one insult, yet keeping the balance of the initial argument complete. Cleese believes satire is very context-dependent for a successful effect. What worked then does not necessarily work now for audiences in the theater of the 2020s. Cleese then thinks it will not muddy the power of the piece, but make it a clearer voice for the audience of today, while not taking away anything from the original intention. This judgment should be understood on a wider scale. It is representative of the revolution in perception and reading that can be seen, at least in the West, in the shift in comedy generationally. What would have been once holed up under irony and exaggeration while accepting the comic now requires literal, sensitive evaluation as part of the vernacular for the contemporary viewer. In this way, Cleese's decision is typical of an entertainment trend whereby the classics are remade to have their cultural critique today, while still keeping intact the heart of the intended message. Cleese's act in this once again gathered together the debate as to whether he unreasonably self-censors artistic reinterpretation or whether it is just a natural evolution in how we define it. Wherever one falls on this debate, it is a testament to the difficulty of keeping satire sharp in an increasingly uptight culture about taking offense. Backlash to the proposed reboot. In early 2023, John Cleese announced that he would be co-writing a reboot of Fawlty Towers alongside his daughter, Camilla Cleese. The news immediately caught public attention, as it marked the first major attempt to revive the legendary sitcom since its original run in the 1970s. Cleese revealed that the new version would center around a modern hotel setting and explore the dynamic between a father and daughter, mirroring his real-life collaboration with Camilla. While Cleese appeared enthusiastic about returning to the world of Fawlty Towers, the announcement quickly sparked a wave of skepticism and criticism from both fans and media commentators. There was prompt and vigorous backlash. Mindful fans of the original series were concerned that any reboot forward or backward would indeed simply dilute the special magic of the original 12 episodes. Critics alleged the original series was a product of its time, pure lightning in a bottle, and its revitalization so many decades later posed the risk of turning a cultural gem into an agonizing shadow of itself. Online forums were flooded with comments warning, "Don't tamper with perfection." Populating social media were sentiments insisting the show must remain untouched in its legacy. Even some TV critics, who held Cleese's career in high esteem, wondered whether there existed any possibility for the reboot even to match the original's impact on present audiences. In February 2024, Cleese returned to Twitter with typically dry sarcasm to respond to the surges of backlash. He ushered forth a formal apology in which he professed to be sorry for all the anger and distress he had caused simply by entertaining a thought of a reboot. The irony of the tweet was seen by many as a direct jab against the backlash and a defense of his own right to walk back into a world he helped to create. The responses to his tweet were mixed. Some praised his wit and resilience, while others felt he was playing fast and loose with the very real concerns of longtime fans. The post soon, the trending showing how alive and vibrating the emotions on the issue were, and how much Fawlty Towers is still a beloved name for its audience. All of this has, aside from the personal exchanges, opened up quite some room for culture-wide discussions. Not so much on the translation of these legacy programs, for today's viewers, Fawlty Towers among them, or even the merit of such translation. The proponents of a reboot argued convincingly that it would be able to provide a very different view from within and introduce the storied name to an entirely new audience. On the other hand, they stressed that originals were often done to death by all standards of modern media: timing, social context, and even irreverent tone. Therefore, it can be argued that the very discussion for the reboot has somehow further carved out the space for Fawlty Towers while raising good questions about nostalgia, intellectual ownership, and reimagining such great classics. Amidst the debate over a potential reboot, there's another aspect of Fawlty Towers that quietly anchors its madness: an unsung hero whose role often goes unnoticed, Polly as voice of reason. In the whirlwind of absurdity that defines Fawlty Towers, Polly stands out as the sole beacon of competence and composure. Surrounded by Basil's manic energy, Sybil's sharp sarcasm, and Manuel's perpetual confusion, Polly serves as the grounded presence who keeps the hotel, if not entirely functional, at least somewhat tethered to reality. She is the calm in the storm, often stepping in to resolve conflicts, smooth over misunderstandings, or quietly clean up the chaos left in Basil's wake. Her ability to navigate the bedlam with intelligence and subtle wit positions her not only as the show's voice of reason, but also as its emotional center. John Cleese and Connie Booth, the co-creators of the show, had something more in mind for Polly than merely being a character in the background or a passive observer. Although she has no desire to take center stage, she is often the character that enables a significant plot twist, emerging usually as a white lie for Basil, bailing Manuel out, or guiding guests from disaster unnoticed. Her value is paramount in showing this dynamic at work. In a highly dysfunctional hotel, there might be collapse without her under its own failings. Unassumed authority and reticent ability empower author Polly to transcend the basically sidekick role and align herself against all this constant havoc as a subtle counterweight. Polly is not so much a hard-headed worker with a burning head for her, who proves quite sternly that the show has little in the way of seriousness. She finds her empathy among the viewers and is perhaps the only character to have seen, amidst all the craziness that surrounds her, the oddest preference for engaging such madness with laughter and compassion rather than deep outrage. Polly rarely plays with other people's lives in her favor, using her razor-sharp wit almost exclusively as a rubbing board upon which to glide her comments deftly. Thus, Polly provides some comic relief and living the air impersonations. Those moments deemed extreme by the audience are tempered through the lenses of esteem and moralizing, receiving from the audience and through a lens of true emotion. Polly's life was vivified by the brilliant understatement of Connie Booth. With her wit and nuance, she thickened situations that dipped into farce. She rolled her eyes with perfection, raised her eyebrows in just the right way, or delivered a line with a touch of disdain. She had mastered that sharp comedic timing that is not vulgar or self-important, and her performance set such a credibly high tone for the whole show. While Basil's tirades and Manuel's befuddled reactions could indeed take center stage, it was Polly's gentle intelligence and kind-heartedness that drew the eye over and above this material turmoil. Cleese and Booth's post-divorce. John Cleese and Connie Booth's ability to collaborate professionally after their divorce stands as one of the most remarkable aspects of the Fawlty Towers legacy. Though the couple divorced in 1978, they had already begun work on the second series of the show, which would air in 1979. Rather than allow their personal history to interfere with their professional commitment, both Cleese and Booth chose to continue working together to complete the series they had begun years earlier. Their decision was not merely an act of professionalism, it was a testament to their mutual respect and dedication to the creative project they had built from the ground up. Despite the emotional complexity that inevitably comes with a breakup, Cleese and Booth reportedly maintained a cordial and effective working relationship throughout the development and filming of the second season. Interviews over the years have revealed that while the separation was personally difficult, both individuals prioritized the integrity of the show above all else. Their collaboration did not appear to suffer from their changed relationship status. In fact, some argue that their ability to set aside personal matters in favor of a shared goal contributed to the focused and refined nature of the final episodes. The second series continued the high standards set by the first, further proving that personal differences didn't derail their professional synergy. Acknowledged equally, too, was that Cleese and Booth, through the second series, retained such a clear vision. Though a differing personal life and emotional climate changed, their alien minds seemed to be on the same creative wavelength, sustaining the tone and rhythm and ambition of Fawlty Towers. So, they don't perceive any difference in quality or continuity in the show from one season to another itself, which stands as proof of their mature and complementary joint effort. It held the identity of the series so that the last 6 episodes could be thought of as not just a patch or half-hearted effort, but an extension. A partnership should be able to withstand pitfalls and even prosper beyond divorce. But that would apply to artistic partners. Cleese and Booth, for instance. They continue to witness each other's industry's ego-ridden, melodramatic, and publicity-hungry fallouts. This is how a profession should go beyond personal history. They finish the series without wrangling through emotional conflict, rare occurrence, if admirable. Some of that staying power of Fawlty Towers rests on their composure and clarity through what would potentially have been stormy waters, and today would be scrutinized as a case study in personal maturation meeting professional excellence, meticulous writing process. The writing process behind Fawlty Towers was famously laborious, with John Cleese and Connie Booth dedicating immense time and effort to ensure each script met their high standards. Unlike many sitcoms that were produced on tight schedules with minimal rewrites, Cleese and Booth would often spend several months developing a single episode. They were known to go through numerous drafts, sometimes as many as 10 or 12, before settling on a final version. Their goal was to make every scene purposeful, every line tight, and every plot development necessary. This approach resulted in a level of narrative precision rarely seen in television comedy at the time. What made their scripts stand out was the careful blending of slapstick chaos with sharply written intellectual humor. The comedic moments weren't just visual gags or punchlines thrown in for effect. They were integrated into the fabric of the story, escalating in complexity as the episode progressed. Farce requires structure, and Cleese and Booth understood that better than most. The absurdity of the situations was always grounded in tightly plotted scenarios, where misunderstandings, timing, and escalation were calculated to a fine degree. This balancing act between broad physical comedy and cerebral wit gave Fawlty Towers its distinctive tone and set it apart from contemporaries. That is why Cleese often felt most mentally drained while engaged in writing, a period of his professional life that he has described as among the toughest. He would often say that farce is the only kind of comedy where there is no such thing as laziness in writing. Each and every piece of the plot has to fit together. Any misstep will ruin all the intended tension and humor. In that instance, usually, he and Booth threw away whole story arcs or episodes from The Frasier Show if they didn't measure up. Such an uncompromising stance on quality meant scads of debate and fine-tuning across revision, as even on small jokes or background details. For Cleese, it's more than a matter of pride, which happened in part to drive the integrity of the show. Such a laborious process explains, among other things, why Fawlty Towers felt very different from the sitcoms of the 70s. Many shows of that time were lighter, character-driven, with improvised elements thrown in or repeating familiar catchphrases. As opposed to that, Fawlty Towers followed very strictly scripted and very precise structures. Compact narratives whose comic tension was masterfully engineered grant a timelessness that has helped the show age better than many of its contemporaries. The writing was not just functional. It was crafted like a concert with the precision expected in a stage play. Nurtured into life by such scrupulous attention to detail, it ensured that the show enjoyed initial success and forever held its rightful place in the history of television. "Don't mention the war" nearly cut one of the most iconic lines in British television history. "Don't mention the war" almost didn't make it to air. During the development of the Germans episode of Fawlty Towers, internal discussions at the BBC revealed significant concern over the line's inclusion. Given that the episode was set to air in the 1970s, only a few decades after World War II, some BBC executives worried the line might be seen as insensitive or offensive to viewers, particularly those who had lived through the conflict. The anxiety was rooted in a fear that joking about such a traumatic historical event could provoke backlash or be seen as making light of serious subject matter. John Cleese, however, strongly defended the inclusion of the line, arguing that it was never intended to mock the war itself or those who experienced it, but rather to satirize the small-minded and socially awkward behavior of certain individuals. The humor, he insisted, lay not in the war references but in Basil Fawlty's inability to handle a situation with tact or sensitivity. Cleese made it clear that the target of the joke was not the historical tragedy, but the ridiculousness of Basil's over-the-top reactions. His argument framed the line as a critique of ignorance rather than a celebration of it, positioning satire as a tool for examining uncomfortable truths. The BBC's reluctance was symptomatic of the wider dilemma that comedy faced in 1970s Britain regarding the treatment of sensitive historical matters. This was the time when British television grew increasingly adventurous. Even so, while one might expect the interests of the wider cultural institutions to be offended as a whole, the most stringent reactions were still common, where the matter under consideration was World War II and still wounded the national psyche. Cleese's insistence on keeping the line in the script marked a huge advancement within the forward evolution of British comedy testing, well beyond limits considered acceptable, and demonstrating that satire could be raised against serious topics without trivializing them. That, too, would set in stone the level of intent in comedy, such as these lines provoke attention rather than offense, if one wields them thoughtfully. This groundbreaking moment in Fawlty Towers not only challenged social norms, but also set the stage for a revolution in how sitcoms would be made. Breaking sitcom conventions. Fawlty Towers stands as a landmark in television history precisely because it broke away from the conventions that defined most sitcoms of the 1970s. While many shows of the era relied heavily on catchphrases, laugh tracks, and predictable setups, Fawlty Towers veered into the realm of psychological farce. Rather than placing characters in isolated gags or one-off comedic premises, the show built entire episodes around escalating misunderstandings, emotional tension, and character-driven absurdity. This layered approach to comedy brought a sense of realism to the show's chaos, turning each episode into a tightly constructed comedic storm that felt both inevitable and unpredictable. Another way Fawlty Towers distinguished itself was through its technical presentation. At a time when multi-camera sitcoms filmed in front of live studio audiences were the industry norm, Cleese and Booth opted for a single-camera format that allowed for greater flexibility in staging and performance. This decision made the show feel more cinematic and less like a stage production, helping it capture a sense of immediacy and authenticity that was unusual for sitcoms of the time. The lack of a laugh track also gave viewers space to absorb the timing and tone of the comedy on their own terms, trusting the audience to respond without prompting. Fawlty Towers shone due to its surrealism combined with sincerity. The Cleese and Booth scripts carried their load of farcical happenings and outlandish situations, yet the humor found its roots in believable emotions and psychological logic. The very essence of the show was not absurdity for its sake, but rather absurdity that reflected some deeper frustration, social anxiety, or interpersonal phobia. This unique mixture of slapstick value married with emotional truth gave the show an entirely different resonance from other so-called comedies. These were intelligent human comedies that strayed away from formula-based structures that failed to bridge some common places with the audience. If this revelation changed the way you see Fawlty Towers, don't forget to hit that like button. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What did you never notice before? Make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets, and hit the bell so you never miss out on the latest insights. And if you're ready for more, Click the video on your screen now. You won't want to miss it.